Hi, I'm Rick Ufford Chase, the mayor of Newport, Vermont, and I have a guest with me this week. It's so important that I actually changed out of my Discover Newport VT t-shirt that I wear on Wednesdays for Wednesdays on the Waterfront and put on a collar shirt for this event. So it's a big deal, Elaine. Thank you for coming. And this is Newport Notes with Rick, and we're really glad to have an opportunity to speak this week. I'm glad to have an opportunity to speak this week with Elaine Collins, who is the superintendent of the North Country Supervisory Union. I called Elaine about a month ago and said, there's an awful lot that I don't understand about the implications of what just took place in the state legislature with the new education bill, and I certainly don't understand very much about what's going on regarding the kind of the next steps for our particular area. So I've asked Elaine to come and just begin by giving us a little bit of a primer on what actually happened, and then we'll go back and forth until I've exhausted my ignorance and we're ready to give up.
Well, thank you for having me here, Rick. I'm not sure that I have a whole lot more information than what the normal person does, because the legislative session was somewhat of a whirlwind. As you know, the governor appointed, and then the appointment was confirmed by the Senate, and Secretary of Education, Zoe Saunders,
yes,
who is from Florida. She does live in Vermont now. And Zoe has a different viewpoint of education because she comes from Florida. It's a much more populated area. And I think the governor all along has been feeling as though, as many of us have, property taxes are too high and they continue to rise. So what can we do to solve that problem?
Something drastic needs to happen in order to respond.
And so my thought going into the legislative session was that we might come up with a different way of funding education, right? So maybe it doesn't fall completely on property taxes. 67% of the education fund is funded currently by property tax. So there are other funding sources, but the majority is property tax. Can you just give a quick, like, what's a little bit of a quick glimpse of what those other funding sources are? What makes up the other third? So lottery sales come to the education fund. All of our state's bad habits fund education. So cannabis sales, lottery sales. There's a cloud tax, some Airbnb taxes. Those things come to the education fund and help fund education. And Vermont funds education in a different way than a lot of other states do. So Vermont currently says in each individual district, in each individual unified district or supervisory union says this is what we need to educate our students, and voters vote on a budget, and then the total aggregate of that goes to the state, and the state figures out, okay, of property taxes and the other tax funds, how are we going to fund this amount that we need to educate our kids this year? In other states, most other states, it's done with a foundation formula. Basically, the state says this is what we're giving you to spend on each of your students, and figure it out. So the governor and the secretary presented their plan, as you know, in the beginning of the legislative session. There were three components to that plan. One was around districting, how large our districts should be. In the original plan, it was 5 districts, which would have stretched from Bradford to the Canadian border and over to New Hampshire for us.
I remember the shock
that
people were expressing.
Yeah.
What it was like back at the end of January, beginning of February. Right?
Yes. We currently have about 119 districts. So to go from 119 to 5 seems like a pretty drastic plan.
Yep.
The second factor in the governor's plan had to do with governance. So currently, every supervisory union or district has a school board that oversees their individual schools or individual unified districts. In North Country, what that means is that we have 63 board members across 15 different boards. We have some that are joint boards, and not all of those are different board members. Some people play the same role, but on different boards.
So can you give me an example of different boards? Like, how does that work currently?
Yep. Yep. So for those schools that send kids to the junior high, for example, there might be a Westfield school board member who serves on the junior high board.
Okay.
Right. To make sure that Westfield's interests are sort of looked out for at the junior high level, and the same for the high school. So we have J. Westfield as a joint district, J. Westfield Elementary School. They did that voluntarily many years ago because of declining population. The junior high is a unified district because many schools send their kids, many towns voted to become a part of the union to send their kids to that school as junior high students, and then the high school, all towns are part of that.
And how many boards total then?
So there are 15 boards total when you factor in J as a separate board, Westfield as a separate board, and then J Westfield as a joint board.
Wow.
And the junior high as a separate board, the high school as a separate board, and then the joint district of the junior high and the high school together.
And the remainder are individual town boards
Correct.
governing their own local schools.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So what that means boils down to is about 17 board meetings a month when you factor in policy committee and executive committee and so forth.
I thought I was juggling a lot of meetings right now.
Yeah. So governance in North Country looks different than many other places. We're sort of the extreme of individual voters having a say in their budgets and in their schools. In lots of districts during Act 46, there was the movement towards unification, which meant that either you became a unified supervisory union where there was one board that would oversee all schools, or a unified district, which essentially the same thing happens, one board or two boards to oversee the entire geographical region. So one of the components of Act 46 was that you had to have all of your schools that were pretty similar. You couldn't have one school that had choice and other schools that didn't. You couldn't have some pre-K to 6s and some pre-K to 8s. We have some pre-K to 6s, some pre-K to 8s, one junior high that not all schools send to.
So the lack of uniformity is part
Yes.
of what makes us
Yeah.
more reliant
More
on
unique.
more boards.
Yeah, and Newport Town has choice for junior high. They did not become part of the unified district. They tuition their students so that if parents want to send their kids to another pre-K to 8 within our district, within our supervisory union, they can.
So if I live in Newport and I have an elementary age child, I could theoretically send them to any school in the district?
If you live in Newport Center and you have a junior high student,
in Newport Center.
Just in Newport Center, you could send them to any other pre-K to 8 school or to the junior high.
Fascinating.
And Coventry has school choice for high school. So they're not a part of the union, and they pay tuition for their students to go wherever they would like, right up to a certain point. So that's an example of how complex governance can become. And in the governor's plan, his idea was 5 board members for each district. So that would be a total of 25 board members for the state. And that those 5 board members in each district, unified district, would be part-time state employees. So it would beg, what agenda might they be, if they're being paid by the state, what agenda might they be interested in forwarding?
And in any case, in our case, we're talking about reducing from 63 board members down to 5. Who would have to represent the interests of all of those different kinds of school configurations that you just described.
Correct. And in a district from Bradford to the Canadian border and to New Hampshire, how many towns are encompassed in that district? So 5 board members to cover that entire unified district.
Wow.
So this is still the governor's plan. The final piece is the foundation formula that I was speaking about before. The third component is the funding, how schools are funded. So that was presented to the legislature, and obviously that put legislators in a bit of a tailspin to try to figure out what to do with it. It really consumed the work of both education committees, the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee. First, the House, H.454, essentially has the three same components. It has redistricting, it has governance, and it has foundation formula. And as you know, there was the two different versions of the bill. Once the House passed the bill to the Senate came up with some different components. And because there was disagreement about the different components of the bill, they had to do a conference committee. The conference committee was made up of 6 different 3 representatives and
from
3
each
senators.
Side, right?
Yep. And of those 6, 2 of them have very close ties to independent schools. So there were some components in the governor's bill around expanding choice for independent schools, and some of that is in the final version of the bill that was voted in and is now law, Act 73 of 2025. And the legislature doesn't renumber their bills, which makes it very confusing sometimes when you refer to Act 46 or Act 73.
Because there's already an Act 73.
Correct. So
you have to spell it out. This is
correct.
Act 73 from 2025.
It makes it a bit confusing. So Act 73 of 2025 has those 3 components in it. It'll take place in phases. The first phase that has already started. They have named members to the redistricting committee. There's been a task force with different representation that has been formed. Those folks will meet over the course of the summer and fall with the plan to come to the legislature in December of this year with up to 3 different plans. There was a lot of conversation during the legislative session around what's better. Is it a unified district, or are supervisory unions better for voters or for education in general? My general feeling on that, and have been an advocate for continuing as a supervisory union. The reason for that is when you unify as a district, you have a certain number of board members and not every town is represented. So in a supervisory union, every board member or every town is represented as a board member on that supervisory union board. So for me, it's about voter representation and making sure that we keep voters connected to their small town schools.
So in the final version of the bill that passed, which is 73, in that version, it doesn't require that it become a union. It allows the possibility that it could still be a supervisory.
Supervisory union as we currently
versus a unified district.
Correct.
Okay, this is really helpful because there is a lot of nuance that I didn't understand.
So the task force members will meet this summer and this fall. They'll come up with their 3 different plans. They'll present to the legislature in January.
And the plans will be what their goal is to figure out how to carve up the state into these new either supervisory unions or tell me again,
unified
districts
or both, right? A combination.
It could be a combination. And I know that the question on everybody's mind is going to be, what's the representation from the NEK on that?
We have
board,
someone, Jen Botzajorns, who was the superintendent for Kingdom East for quite a long time. We have some small town advocates. The Rural School Community Alliance, RSCA, came about shortly after the governor's plan was presented. Margaret McLean and others came together to form this really grassroots organization to fight for rural schools. Most of us in Vermont are rural, but we tend to pay more attention to bigger voices in larger places. So their idea was to really band together the rural schools' voices so that our context and different circumstances are heard at the state level. So RSCA advocated for 3 different members, and 2 of those 3 are now on that committee.
Out of how many?
Out of, I believe it's 13.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Gosh, I don't envy this group.
Yeah.
It sounds like a...
It's a politically charged
Yeah, it's going to
task.
be a really challenging
right?
thing to sort out.
I will say there are no superintendents that I can think of that are a fan of this act, and it's not because we're looking for job security or wondering what's going to happen to us next. It is because I'm not convinced that this will actually positively impact outcomes for students, right? Our jobs first and foremost is to think about how do we best deliver education for students. So if we play out why we have this act to begin with, it was because of a property tax relief need, right?
Right.
Property taxes continued to go up, and the governor's plan was really, he said at first, to impact property taxes more positively. So that didn't happen right off, right? That's not going to happen right off. This will take time, and in the interim, this past year, he infused $72.1 million of one-time funds and $41 million of educational surplus funds, which already sets us up for $118 million hole to fill this next year moving forward. That will make budgeting season.
Meaning that money came in last year as a stopgap, and
Yes.
it won't be available this coming year.
Correct. Yeah. So in addition to just doing business as usual, we'll also have to figure out how we're going to solve the $118 million one-time funds hole.
So is that what they mean when they say foundation budget? That they're prescribing the total income that's available and saying, here's how y'all have to figure out how you're going to divide that up.
Correct.
Is that what that means?
Well, so foundation formula, basically they would set whatever the amount is they would give us as a base for each student, and then there would be weights added for things like special education or poverty or sparsity or rurality, those kinds of things. So each district would get a slightly different amount, but essentially it would be on a base amount of how much each student would get. Or
changing district by district or blanket across the state?
Across the state.
Okay.
So interestingly, the foundation formula would, in lower spending districts, actually cause a tax increase, right? Because
that's what I've been hearing, and
Yes.
I want to better understand that. Because I've certainly heard advocates in this area say, we're going to end up getting penalized.
Yes.
Because we spend less money per student.
Correct.
So can you describe that so that I better understand it?
Yes. So in this foundation formula model, what would happen is the state would say, here's what you're going to get. They did some modeling at some point towards the end of the legislative session that said, all right, based on your current population, here's what you would get for education funding, and here's what the tax rate would be statewide. So currently, every town or city has their tax rate set by the state, and it's different according to how much education dollars are being spent, how many kids are in each school, and what the CLA, the common level of appraisal, is for each town. It's a pretty and whatever the state sets as a dollar yield, what they would give you for each student. It's a pretty complicated and non-transparent system, right? It's really hard for people to understand.
To get their heads around what's going on there.
That's right. So in some cases, towns can spend less and their tax rates go up, right? So in a foundation formula, the state would set the whole state's tax rate.
Yep.
And so what that means is that if it were $1.32, which is what the modeling originally stated, that those towns that had a tax rate less than $1.32 would have to rise to $1.32. They might see an increase in tax education funding dollars coming to their school building, but the effect would be higher taxes for their taxpayers. And in a foundation formula, because the state sets the amount and sets the tax rate, voters don't vote.
And concurrently, is it also true that if you spend more and you've been taxing at a higher rate, it will lower it?
Correct. So in higher spending districts, your tax rate will lower. In lower spending districts, your taxes will be higher. So, for example, Derby is a good example of this. They are typically low spenders, and because they have economy of scale, they have about 525 students in their school building, and they get a lot of tuition money from Holland and Morgan. They can't really spend every year what they go to the voters for. So they typically have a surplus of $400,000 to $600,000 at the end of every year.
Wow.
They're responsible about that, right? They put it towards capital improvement or put it in a roof fund or those kinds of things. And the voters have been very supportive of the school through the years. But Derby is a low spender, and they can't spend what they currently raise. Derby would get about, according to the modeling, $2.6 million more than they currently raise through taxes, and their tax rate would rise 32 cents. So they don't get a say about how much they're given, and voters wouldn't get a say about what their tax rate was.
And what happens if they don't spend what they're given?
So it's a surplus, right? It either rolls, you either try to spend it on things that you have in your control, like capital improvement projects or those kinds of things, or you bring it back to the voters with a proposal for what to do with it. Sometimes towns who have surpluses ask for tax stabilization funds, right? Might infuse some back to the taxpayers to cause tax rates to draw down a little bit, or often it goes into a capital improvement fund or a construction fund or something of that sort.
Okay. All right, so I think we've dealt with 2 out of those 3 things, right, so far. We've talked about the foundation formula, and we've talked about the governance.
Yes, and the redistricting.
Okay, so that's all 3. Governance, redistricting, and the money are the questions.
Yeah, and so the phased-in part of this is that the legislature would have to vote on whatever redistricting plan they felt was best for the state, or they don't. And if they don't vote in a redistricting plan, that means that it dies, because the rest of it is contingent upon redistricting. So at the same time that the redistricting task force is up and running, there's also a voting ward task force that has been that will get up and running. That task force will be to determine, of the districts, how many board members, what does representation look like, who gets a say into who the district's board members are, those kinds of things. So the redistricting is supposed to go into effect relatively soon, assuming that the legislature votes it in. And really what that means, at least to begin with, is that one central office, one North Country Supervisory Union office for the entire district, or whatever district it is, right? And so one superintendent, one business manager, one special services director, one human resources director. My worry and my wonder about that, if the legislature and Governor Scott's office felt that would save money, I'm not sure that actually will save money. So if you think about, let's say, for example, North Country, Orleans Central Supervisory Union, and Essex North become one big supervisory union. That would be Jay Westfield on our most west, all the way to the New Hampshire border, and down to Albany. So it's a huge geographical region. I only know from the superintendent's perspective that my job, aside from going to a lot of board meetings and supporting board work, is really supporting principals. There are still schools in each of those towns, right, or in most of those towns, and those principals are still going to call with problems. The business of school is still happening.
So the truth is, you're going to have to create some middle management no matter what.
Correct.
In order to manage all of that area, geographic area.
That's correct. Because principals, there are sometimes really emergent things that happen that principals need support with, and that's the job of the superintendent. I get on an average day, 4 to 8 calls a day from principals about this thing or that thing that's going on. And it can be a really large student issue, it can be a safety issue, it can be a parent issue, it can be a personnel issue, right? All of those things happen on a day-to-day basis, and principals really need support, and they need to know someone is going to be on the other end of the line when they call. And it has to be somebody who knows how schools work. So whether that is one centralized office with regional offices with assistants that are there, I don't know what it will look like, but I'm not sure that that model in this really large geographical region really is practical. And if we have a lot of middle management, I'm not sure how much money that will actually save.
End up saving in the long run, right? And am I right that part of the idea is that it's going to force unification of small town schools in order to just make the numbers work?
There are, I think, lots of hidden and not so hidden agendas, and I think, yes, absolutely, the end run, when you consolidate districts and eliminate voter representation on boards, it becomes much easier to close small schools. The difficulty comes, and I can only speak about North Country's context, but it happens across the state. There's no school in our supervisory union that has the ability to take on the population of another school, even if we were to split up a school, right?
The schools are too big for the dwindling population in their own town, but not big enough to, at the moment, consume another school or consume, adopt another school to be a part of it.
That's right. Yeah. So part of the legislation has minimum class sizes, and the Secretary of Education may, not shall, but may, after a 3-year period, if the school has difficulty meeting the minimum, even with consolidated classes, like a 1-2 combination, for example, may take action to close the school down or help the school to figure out how to make it work. So our 2 smallest schools currently are Lowell, it's a pre-K to 8, and J. Westfield,
Lowell's
pre-K
about,
to 6.
80, 85 students?
They're both about 80 students. They both have consolidated grades. All classrooms are combined with the exception of kindergarten for the most part. And they would have difficulty in some class configurations meeting the minimum class size. So,
which is what?
It ranges depending on the age of the student from 10 to 25 or 20, but there's some wiggle room there for specialized classes like IEP classes, or high school class that's an AP class, for example, has smaller class sizes because there aren't as many students who enroll in those courses. So the end run, I think, right, is that we would potentially, let's say we were to close J. Westfield and Lowell. They're close, relatively close in proximity to each other, and let's say we found some magical in the middle point for this new school to be built. Who's going to pay for that? And so there's no construction. There's construction funds mentioned in the act, but no source for where the construction funds are coming from. And you can't force a school to close without offering an alternative place for them to go. So,
which in theory could also be a problem for us, like with North Country and Lake Region, right? Like, is it likely to force a consolidation of those 2 schools at some point?
Potentially, right? So North Country has about 720 students, 9 through 12. Lake Region, I think, somewhere around 350 to 400. I'm not sure of their exact enrollment. In earlier versions of the bill, there were school size minimums. Those are no longer in there. But consolidation of SUs or districts just pushes us in the direction of consolidation of schools. But the state will have to step up and figure out how they're going to fund construction, right? Because we don't have the money, our taxpayers wouldn't have the money to come up with, a bond vote for combined Lake Region, North Country, Union High School together, right? And we may be in a place where we need to rebuild the high school anyway because of the PCB issue from last summer. Everyone can remember.
Yes.
Students
I've
in
had a little bit of
tents.
conversation with Chris Young about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the sense of timing, it may be good timing to be thinking about consolidation of high schools. But the price tag is
going to be pretty astronomical. So my family is from Lowell, and my grandfather, I'm told, cast a deciding vote, like literally the deciding vote in favor of building what is now the Lowell graded school. Gosh, I don't know how many years ago that was now, but it was a long time ago. He died in '85, so had to be 40. I think it was the year he died, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it was probably 1985 that they made that vote. But, I look at that and say, okay, well, if there are 80 students left, and you're talking about another school that isn't viable potentially numbers-wise with Westfield and Jay, like one might think, okay, well, logically, do you divide these kids up depending on where they live in the town of Lowell and send some to Albany and some to Eden and some to Jay Westfield, which isn't even on the table.
Right.
So I can't get my head around, and I'm sure I'm not alone, how in the world you try and sort through these issues, and how you do it in a way where you don't end up putting first graders on a bus at, even 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning and busing them for 45 minutes to an hour.
We already have that happening.
Right. I mean, that's already going on right?
So I think the other factor, aside from the logistics of little kids on buses, is that we lose community when we close schools.
We sure do.
Lowell, what else does Lowell have? Right?
That school is the school and Cajun Snack Shack are the two things that ground that community.
That's correct. So I worry about that, the viability of some of our small towns when the school closes.
Right.
And to do that without voter representation and without board member representation feels wrong and doesn't feel like it's the way we do business in Vermont. And so I was not a fan of this bill. That doesn't mean that I don't think there needs to be change and that we need to be more efficient. And I think we definitely need to find ways to provide property tax relief for our voters.
So do you have thoughts about what that would look like, efficiency in providing relief for property tax?
Yeah, I think there are ways already that North Country shares resources at the SU level. We have a budget of $18.8 million at our central office that includes special educators, neuro team specialists, behavior team specialists, curriculum folks, my office, HR, payroll, all of that. $18.8 million is a big price tag.
Yep.
Of that, we bill back to our communities 8.8 because we manage a large amount of grant money. And we do that intentionally, and we braid grant sources together so that it increases optimizes our ability to support students and schools and decreases the liability for taxpayers, right? So it's a force magnifier, and it helps small schools like Lowell and Jay Westfield to have support around behavior specialists and neurodevelopmental team specialists. They wouldn't be able to afford that on their own, but they can pay a piece of that at the SU level. I think at North Country we do a fairly good job in terms of efficiency, and there's always ways that we can improve what we're doing, and I'm open to suggestions around that. But I'm forgetting what the second part of efficiency and...
Well, it was the property tax question,
right?
Property was what you were saying. Relief, was like, yes, I get that we need the property tax relief. But.
Yeah, so I think there's been, this is 36 years for me in education. I've been around a time or two and have seen kind of the evolution of public elementary schools and high schools. Schools now do a lot more than just educate students. Our student population has a lot of need that it didn't have 30 years ago, 20 years ago,
Yes.
even 10 years ago. Our community resources dwindle. Human services is at a point where they are having difficulty. They're trying to rebuild, but they've been at a point for a while where they're having difficulty providing supports for families.
And so that burden has gotten shifted to the school district.
It shifts to the school district. So we have lots of positions in schools that didn't exist, 20 years ago. School-based clinicians that we provide on-site mental health support for students. Behavior specialists that we wouldn't have needed 20 years ago, right? We now have students who have trauma or some mental health issues that aren't being supported outside of school, and they need support with a behavior specialist and a behavior interventionist who's with them one-on-one. We have an increased need for guidance counselors who do, this isn't the guidance counselor who sits and helps you sign up for classes. This is a guidance counselor who helps you learn how to be a productive human being.
Yes.
And teaches social skills and emotional regulation skills in the classroom setting. All of those things come at a cost. Free meals for everybody.
Yeah.
We provide clothing for kids. We provide transportation, homeschool coordination for kids to get back and forth to doctor's appointments and such. We have so many of our families struggle and have challenges in ways that we didn't have 20 years ago. And yet we're using education dollars to support kids in those ways. It's the right thing to do because no one else can do it. But perhaps the funding source shouldn't be education tax. Perhaps the funding source should be some of those other departments that should and historically did provide those supports for kids and families.
Do you think the need for that kind of support system has shifted over the last 20 to 40 years, or has just our recognition of the reality shifted and we're more attuned to it? In other words, was the situation dramatically different in 1990 than it is in 2025?
I think so. I think we also are more aware of it, so it's probably a little of both and. Mm-hmm. We have a lot more families who struggle with mental health issues. That was probably true in 1990, but more so now, I think. The drug addiction issues that are in our community certainly have added mental health issues for families and for children, actually. If you're in a chronically stressful environment where a lot of your needs aren't getting met, sometimes that causes some mental health issues for kids, understandably so. The need for providing for basic needs for kids probably existed some in 1990, exists much more now. Kids who are,
That's helpful.
transient or homeless or, all of the things that our society are struggling with right now that shows up in our schools.
So in part, it makes me think of the kind of breakdown of extended family and the way, my family, which goes back 5 generations in Lowell, right? The support system really always was aunts and uncles and grandparents and people who could help pick up the slack when a family hit hard times.
I was a foster kid, and I'm pretty old, but I was a foster kid at a time when kids weren't really taken away from their families, and I was very fortunate to go live with my aunt and uncle, who were dairy farmers, and redeemed my possibilities.
Yes.
And I became a foster parent because I was a foster kid, and so I paid
How many have you done? Someone told me.
53.
Oh my gosh. I can't even quite get my head around that on top of 36 years in the education world.
Yeah. And I was so fortunate to have the ability to have extended family members that supported me. I had grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and it was a tribe of people who supported me. The difference, I think, now is that many of our kids don't have an extended family who can help them because their extended family are generational trauma kids, right?
Yes.
So they didn't, someone from my generation who might not have had the same opportunity that I did, who stayed in a traumatic environment, who then raised their kids in a traumatic environment, who are now raising kids in a traumatic environment. We're talking parents and grandparents who don't have another way of being, right? This is their way. So the only place some of our students are going to get the supports they need is at school.
Okay, so we've gone on a long time, longer than I normally do, and I think we should probably wrap up, but it actually begs a lot more questions for me that I think, I would like to be in conversation as mayor of Newport with you in whatever this new configuration is going to look like, right? In part because, I get a little nervous that I think I hear the possibility for people beginning to pit small town needs in governance and providing services against the education system's needs, right? Or, well, we've already done that tax over there, we can't do this over here, which just seems like a zero-sum game to me, right? At the end of the day, we've got to figure out how all of these things are actually bound together and what it is we're doing as a community that's going to support our kids and all of our residents in the long term. So I just want to kind of say to you and kind of the whole world in the Northern NEK, I have energy for that conversation. I don't quite know where it would lead because I am so unaware. I've had so little experience in your world. But, the more I do now after 4 months or so as mayor of Newport, the more I learn, the more concerned I become that we're having two really, in Newport at least, we're having two very hard conversations simultaneously. One is the one that we've been talking about for the last half hour or so. And the other one is, what do we do about the long-term prospects to make sure that this town actually gets turned around and has a potential in the future to kind of be a place where people want to come and be and stay long term. So I'm really grateful, Elaine, for all of that and for the education that I feel like you're helping me with. And if there are any things that we can do from the town's perspective to be helpful, and I can't even imagine how you and the other superintendents are trying to get your heads around the what comes next question right now. I'm sure there has to be some okay, we just got to wait and see to some extent what happens next.
And some behind the scenes conversations
I'm sure that's
as well.
true too.
But I'm happy to continue the conversation and happy to sit down with you again.
Good, in front of the camera or not, either way. Certainly. Like I would just love to be a part of those conversations with you. And you and I have been a part of other conversations around some of the other big challenges confronting us, like the fact that there's not good housing available. There's not much of any housing available. And so it's really hard to hire good people to come work for the supervisory union. And so we'll keep all of that going.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
So I want to thank all of you who have been listening in and ask you if you have questions or things you'd like to explore further, you're welcome to reach out, I'm sure, to Elaine, but also to me, and we'll keep this conversation going in the future. I expect I'll be back to do another taping of Newport Notes with the mayor next week, because we have a big council meeting coming up this Monday, and like every agenda right now, all of our agendas for our meetings are pretty full. So thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in a week.